Chapter 3. The Order of the Lamplighters. The card Kale had left behind was heavier than it looked, made of some dark material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Elegant script proclaimed it the property of the Gaslight Order Keepers of the Balance, with an address on Pemberton Square that Alara knew housed only the city's most exclusive gentlemen's clubs. She'd spent the day pacing her destroyed apartment, sweeping up glass and trying to salvage what she could of her artworks. But her mind kept returning to two things: the predatory hunger in Kale's silver eyes and Clara's pale face when she'd visited her sister that morning. Clara was dying. The physicians had stopped pretending otherwise, speaking in hushed tones about making her comfortable and preparing for the inevitable. At 19, her sister was already a ghost, her once bright laughter reduced to rattling coughs that echoed through the charity ward like breaking glass. As the sun began to set, painting Elberg's smoke-stained sky in shades of amber and blood, Yulara made her choice. She wrapped her remaining sketches in oilcloth, tucked her most precious art supplies into a worn leather satchel, and set out for Pemberton Square. The Gaslight Order's headquarters wasn't what she'd expected. Instead of the austere gentleman's club sauve she'd imagined, the address led her to a narrow townhouse squeezed between two larger buildings. The only identifying mark was a small brass plaque bearing the same symbols that had blazed from Kale's hands when he'd banished the Glimmer Wraith. She knocked, and the door opened immediately, as if someone had been waiting. "Miss Vance," said a thin man in an impeccable black suit. His face was ageless in the way of servants in wealthy households, could have been 30 or 60, with features carefully trained to reveal nothing. "Master Kale is expecting you. Please follow me." The interior was a steady and understated opulence. Rich mahogany paneling lined the walls, interrupted by oil paintings that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. Gas lamps flickered in ornate sconces, but their light felt different somehow, colder, more penetrating than ordinary flame. They climbed a narrow staircase past several floors of closed doors. Alara caught glimpses of rooms filled with strange apparatus, glass tubes filled with glowing liquids, mechanical devices that ticked with rhythms that didn't match any earthly clockwork, bookshelves lined with volumes bound in materials she didn't want to identify. "The Order has been watching you for some time," the servant said conversationally as they climbed. "Your emergence was quite dramatic. Most seers develop their abilities gradually over years. For you—" He paused, glancing back at her with eyes that held depths of knowledge. "You awakened all at once, fully formed. It's caused quite a stir among the membership." They reached the top floor, where ornate double doors opened onto a spacious office that occupied the entire level. Tall windows looked out over the city, and Alara gasped as she realized she could see things from up here that hadn't been visible from street level. Threads of silver light connecting the gas lamps in patterns that resembled a vast web. Shadows that moved independently of their sources, and shapes moving through the sky that definitely weren't birds. "Magnificent, isn't it?" Kale rose from behind an enormous desk, grasped from the same dark material as his calling card. "Most people see only the surface, the carriages, the buildings, the ordinary bustle of city life, but you see the truth beneath, the real Ethelberg, where two worlds are slowly becoming one. Two worlds, the world of men and the world of the Fae." Kale gestured to the windows, where those silver threads pulsed with ethereal light. "For centuries they've existed separately, divided by barriers as old as creation itself. But those barriers are weakening, Miss Vance. The distortion has begun." Alara moved closer to the windows, her artist's eye cataloging the impossible geometry of the light web. "What's the distortion?" "A convergence," said a new voice from the shadows. A woman emerged from an alcove Alara hadn't noticed. Tall, elegant, with silver hair piled high and eyes like chips of winter sky. She wore robes that seemed to be cut from midnight itself, and when she moved, Alara caught glimpses of symbols embroidered in thread that hurt to look at directly. "I am Magistrix Corvina, leader of this chapter of the Order. The distortion is the slow merging of our reality with the realm of the Fee. Left unchecked, it will transform our world into something unrecognizable." "But you can stop it," Laura said. though something in the woman's tone made it sound more like a question. Magistrix Corvina and Kael exchanged a look that lasted a heartbeat too long. We can manage it, Corvina said carefully. Channel it. Control its effects to minimize the chaos. But such work requires individuals with very specific talents. Like mine. Precisely. Kale moved to stand beside her at the window. This close, she could smell that winter and stone scent again, could see that his pupils reflected light like a cat's. Seers are rare enough, but you, Miss Vance, are something far more precious. Your art doesn't just perceive reality, it shapes it. You're what we call a forger. The words sent a shiver down her spine, though she couldn't say why. What does that mean? It means, Corvina said, settling into a chair upholstered in leather that looked suspiciously like human skin, that you can write truth with ink and will. Your sketches don't just record what is, they can influence what becomes. With proper training, proper resources, you could help us maintain the balance between worlds. Alara thought of the binding she'd drawn, of how it had actually held back the glimmer wraith, and in exchange. Everything you need, Kale said smoothly. A cure for your sister's condition. We have physicians who understand ailments that conventional medicine cannot touch. Financial security beyond your current comprehension. Training that will unlock the full potential of your abilities. And protection, Corvina added. The emergence of a forger sends ripples through both worlds, Miss Vance. There are entities that would very much like to claim you for their own purposes. The Order can keep you safe from such interests. It sounded perfect, too perfect. Alara had grown up poor enough to recognize when someone was trying to sell her something, and wealthy enough people didn't offer charity without expecting something substantial in return. What exactly would my service entail? Another of those weighted glances passed between Kaol and Corvina. Nothing onerous, Corvina said. Occasional consultations, artistic commissions to help maintain certain containments. Your talent would be invaluable in reinforcing the barriers between worlds. Barriers you just said were weakening. Kale's smile was sharp as winter. Some barriers are meant to weaken, Miss Vance. Others must be maintained at all costs. The Order has spent centuries learning to distinguish between them. There was something in his tone, something that reminded her of the way the Glimmer Wraith had spoken about her talent. A hunger, carefully controlled but unmistakably present. I need guarantees, she said, about Clara's treatment, about my own safety. Of course, Corvina produced a document from thin air, literally, as far as Alara could tell. The contract was written on parchment that felt warm to the touch, in ink that seemed to move slightly when she wasn't looking directly at it. Everything we discussed is detailed here. Your sister will receive the finest care our resources can provide. You'll be given quarters here in the headquarters, with access to materials and training that will develop your abilities beyond anything you've imagined. Alara scanned the document, but the language was archaic, full of subclauses and conditions that seemed to twist back on themselves. The longer she looked at it, the more her head began to ache. This is quite complex, she said. I'd like some time to review it properly. Temperature in the room dropped noticeably. Corina's winter blue eyes fixed on her with unsettling intensity. Miss Vance, I'm afraid time is not a luxury we can afford. The distortion accelerates daily. Other parties are already moving to claim you, if you delay. Other parties? Rogue elements, Kale said dismissively. Criminals and outcasts who would exploit your abilities for personal gain rather than the greater good without the Order's protection. You'd be vulnerable to their manipulations. Alara looked again at the contract, at words that seemed to shift and change when she tried to focus on them. Her instincts screamed warnings, but Clara's face swam before her eyes, pale, wasted, running out of time. If I sign this, Clara gets treatment immediately. The moment the ink dries, Corvina assured her. Alara reached for the ornate pen. Corvina offered, but something made her hesitate. The Glimmer Wraith had called Kale Hound of the Order, and there had been recognition in that crystalline voice, not just awareness, but familiarity. One more question, she said. How exactly do you maintain these barriers between worlds? What methods do you use? The silence that followed was deafening. Kale and Corvina exchanged another look, And this time, Alara caught something in their expressions that made her blood run cold. Not uncertainty, calculation. They were deciding how much to tell her, or perhaps how much they could get away with not telling her. Specialized techniques, Corvina said finally, ancient knowledge passed down through generations of order members. Nothing you need concern yourself with initially. But I would be part of these techniques eventually. Your talents would contribute to the greater work, yes. The evasion in her voice was enough. Alara set down the pen and stepped back from the desk. I'm sorry, but I can't sign this. Not without understanding exactly what I'd be agreeing to. The change in the room's atmosphere was immediate and terrifying. The gas lamps flickered, casting wild shadows that seemed to reach for her with grasping fingers. Kale's silver eyes blazed with cold light, and when Corvina smiled, her teeth looked far too sharp. Miss Vance, Corvina said, her voice still pleasant but with an undertone like breaking ice, I'm afraid you misunderstand the nature of our offer. This isn't a negotiation. It's a choice between cooperation and alternatives. What kind of alternatives? Kale moved with that predatory grace, positioning himself between Alara and the door. Your sister is in the charity ward of St. Bartholomew's Hospital, is she not? Third floor, bed 17. Such a shame how fire spreads so quickly in those old buildings, especially in the medical wards, where patients can't escape on their own. The threat was delivered with the same cultured politeness he'd shown since their first meeting, which somehow made it infinitely more terrifying. You're threatening my sister. Alara's voice came out steadier than she felt. We're offering protection, Corvina corrected. From all the terrible accidents that might befall an unguarded invalid. Really, Miss Vance, the world is such a dangerous place for those without powerful allies. Alara's hand moved instinctively to her satchel, where her sketchbook waited. She could feel power building in her fingertips, the same energy that had created the binding war, but she was vastly outnumbered, in the heart of their stronghold, facing people who understood her abilities far better than she did. I need time to think, she said. You have until dawn, Kale said. After that, our offer expires, and you'll find yourself dealing with the consequences of refusing our generous protection. The servant who'd escorted her upstairs appeared as if summoned, waiting to escort her out. As Alara moved toward the door, Corvina's voice followed her. Miss Vance, your sister looks so peaceful when she sleeps. It would be such a shame if that peace were disturbed. Alara fled down the narrow staircase, past the rooms full of inexplicable apparatus, past the paintings that watched her with knowing eyes. The servant opened the front door without a word, and she stumbled out into the gaslit evening, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd been naive to think the order was offering her a choice. They wanted her power, and they were prepared to use Clara as leverage to get it. But if she refused, if she tried to run, how long could she protect her sister from people who commanded resources beyond her imagination? As she walked through Ethelberg's twisting streets, she noticed things she'd missed before. The gas lamps weren't just connected by threads of silver light, they pulsed in rhythm, like a vast heartbeat. Shadows moved independently of their sources, and in those shadows she caught glimpses of watchers. The Order's people, or something else entirely. She was trapped between impossible choices: submit to people who clearly saw her as a tool to be used, or watch Clara suffer the consequences of her defiance. But as she turned down a side street that led toward the older part of the city, toward neighborhood the gaslight hadn't yet fully claimed, Yalara remembered something. The Glimmer Wraith had mentioned others, entities less negotiable than itself. Kale had spoken of rogue elements and criminal outcasts. Perhaps the Order wasn't the only game in town. Perhaps there were alternatives they hadn't mentioned, options they preferred she not know about. She quickened her pace, heading for the districts where Ethelbert showed its older face, where cobblestone gave way to packed earth and gaslight to flickering torches. If there were others who understood the hidden world, if there were people the Order considered threats, then maybe, just maybe, she could find allies who wouldn't demand her sister's life as collateral. Behind her, she could feel eyes watching from the shadows, and the silver threads connecting the gas lamps pulsed with increasing urgency, as if carrying news of her decision to flee. The hunt was intensifying. and Alara Vance had just made herself prey to forces far more dangerous than she'd ever imagined.